The great thing about this rediscovery of sense of place is that it cost nothing. It was an amenity, it is an intelligent amenity. We take whatever was going to be built anyway, and by virtue of following certain rules, we made it a saleable amenity, demonstrably so. And whole seminars can actually be set on that by new urbanists, and we can explain how the value kicks in, the rise in value, when both sides of the street are made and people can actually feel the space. It's no longer an image, it's a space. It's not in the brochure. The other thing that is proximity. Proximity. That shop you had to build anyway, instead of separating it, instead of separating the convenience store behind a parking lot and a berm and so forth, you bring it in and turn it into a corner store. And then you have a destination to your walking. That strip shopping center you were going to build, bring it in and make it a main street, and it becomes an amenity. And so what happened is in this case, by weaving together and by the proximity of that which is built anyway all over suburbia, we created walkability. Walkability because of the sense of place, and the destination which gave you reason to walk. And that cost nothing.
The problem is, of course, is that the codes that were adopted across the country, and starting in the 20s and 30s, but mostly in the 50s and early 60s, are very restrictive, and they produce a certain kind of urbanism, which is, frankly, sprawl for the most part. And that's what we're trying to reject, but it's actually very hard to change the law. I mean, the places that I work still are working with the old codes.
The zoning codes are typically a barrier to getting walkable, mixed-use, compact places built. And specifically, the zoning will often set maximum densities for the development, and that at the very low densities, it's hard to get a critical mass of people and all of the benefits of walkability and having a neighborhood center and walk-to institutions and so on that we all value and that Americans really love. But zoning opposes it and prevents it. Second thing is mixed-use zoning. Oftentimes, entire municipalities are divided up into sectors where the retail will go one place, the housing another, the office a third, and so on, and they are all interconnected by asphalt paving. And so what the new urbanism is about is taking that mix of uses and decentralizing it and having some of those uses in every neighborhood. Again, the zoning often opposes this.
Andres and DPZ and others have been working on the SMART code and whole transect-based codes, also called form-based codes, as a way of responding, reforming the zoning as an easy way. In fact, he's not even saying you do away with the old zoning, he's just suggesting that these codes be provided as an alternative, so you don't have to get rid of something, you just actually add a new way of accomplishing development.
The current buzzword in development regulations is form-based coding. And a lot of planning consultants out there think that the design guidelines they're creating are form-based code. But there's a key distinction. First of all, design guidelines are just that, they're guidelines. They often are written more as suggestions and often lack the force of law. The other element of a form-based code is that you really are putting building form ahead of issues like density and use. Density and use don't go away, they simply move to a different level of the hierarchy of information. And the structure, the armature upon which you hang the various regulations, is the building type. So for instance, a townhouse, which typically wants to be raised up from the sidewalk to achieve a certain amount of privacy, and is often fairly close to the street, you need a stoop to get from the sidewalk a half a level up to the main floor. Well, the form-based code will say you have to have a stoop, it needs to be roughly this wide, you don't want to hide it behind a big wall. Very simple regulations like that. But a storefront, for instance, wouldn't have a stoop. A storefront you'd enter at grade. A stacked flat building, what we think of as a large apartment building, typically you enter into a lobby which would be at grade, and you take the elevator up to upper floors. And in that case, again, you don't want to create barriers for people who might be in wheelchairs. for example. So each different building type dictates a different set of rules. And if you were to take an element like a stoop, and you were to write a section in your zoning, not a form-based code, but zoning about a stoop, and you were to try to describe all the different building types where a stoop made sense, and then exclude the ones where it didn't, you'd have this incredibly long list of building types, and it would get very complex. So the beauty of a form-based code is you select the building types that make sense in a community. Those become essentially the building blocks that create the physical blocks, and then those blocks in turn create the neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods create the city or the town. But what you've done is you've defined your kit of parts with which you build the community, and you hang the rules on the different building types. So it's really an elegant, effective system, but it does require that there be a physical plan in place. You don't simply roll out a carpet of form-based coding across every square mile of the city. You do it in the places where citizens have come together with intent to create a very specific intervention in a neighborhood.